The early morning sun cast long shadows across the steps of Hope Harbor Shelter as Lily walked up with 2 boxes of fresh bagels in her arms. At 28, she had everything most people dreamed of: a successful career as a corporate lawyer, a luxury apartment overlooking the city, and parents who had given her every opportunity in life. Yet something felt missing, which was why she spent every Saturday morning volunteering at the shelter. That morning started like any other. Lily arranged the bagels on paper plates, brewed fresh coffee, and chatted with the regular volunteers. As she poured coffee into paper cups, she noticed someone new sitting quietly in the corner, reading a worn copy of The Great Gatsby. He looked different from the other shelter visitors, not in his appearance, which was as weathered as anyone else's, but in the way he carried himself, with a quiet dignity that caught her attention. When Mrs. Wu, the elderly shelter coordinator, asked for help organizing the donation room, the man immediately stood up to help. Lily found herself working alongside him, sorting through boxes of winter clothes. His name was David, and despite his rough exterior, his eyes held a warmth that made her feel instantly at ease. As they worked, their conversation flowed naturally from books to music to philosophy. David spoke about Plato's cave with such passion that Lily found herself completely absorbed. Sometimes, he said, picking up a worn jacket from the donation pile, the shadows we think are reality are just projections of what we're taught to believe. During their lunch break, Lily discovered that David had a way of making everyone around him smile. He helped Tommy, a 7-year-old shelter resident, with his math homework, explaining multiplication through a game he made up with apple slices. When an elderly man got frustrated with the shelter's computer, David patiently showed him how to set up an email account to contact his grandchildren. What struck Lily most was how David treated everyone with equal respect, from the janitor to the corporate donors who occasionally visited. He had a gift for listening that made people feel heard and understood. When a teenage girl came in crying about being bullied at school, David shared a story about finding strength in difficult times that had her laughing within minutes. As weeks passed, Lily found herself looking forward to their Saturday conversations more and more. They would discuss everything from current events to childhood dreams, and David's insights always left her thinking long after she'd gone home. Despite his circumstances, he never complained or spoke bitterly about his situation. Instead, he focused on helping others at the shelter, teaching job interview skills to younger residents and helping older ones navigate social services. One rainy Saturday, Lily arrived to find David teaching a group of shelter residents how to play chess using a makeshift board he created from cardboard and bottle caps. The sight of him patiently explaining strategies to his eager students made her smile. When their eyes met across the room, something shifted in her heart. She realized that beneath his humble exterior lay a soul of rare beauty. What her wealthy parents would think of her growing feelings for a homeless man never crossed her mind that morning. She didn't know that this simple Saturday would set in motion events that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen for who she was, not what she owned or what she did for a living. As David helped her clean up that evening, their hands touched briefly over a chess piece. The connection she felt in that moment was more real than anything she'd experienced in all her years of elite dating and social events. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a story that would challenge everything she and her family believed about love, worth, and the true meaning of success. Lily's mother nearly dropped her teacup when she first heard about David. "A homeless man?" she exclaimed, her voice echoing through their massive dining room. "Darling, you can't be serious." Her father lowered his newspaper, his face darkening with concern. As prominent members of the city's social elite, the Wangs had always pictured their daughter with someone from their circle, preferably the son of one of their country club friends. But Lily couldn't get David out of her mind. Every moment they spent together showed her a new side of him that made her heart grow fonder. One afternoon, she watched him teach a group of children at the shelter how to plant seeds in small paper cups. Sometimes, he told them, The most beautiful things come from the humblest beginnings. The way his eyes lit up when the kids excitedly showed him their work made her smile. Her parents' disapproval grew stronger with each passing day. They'd hired Mr. Thompson, their longtime private investigator, to dig into David's past. "We need to protect you," her mother insisted over their weekly lunch at the prestigious Golden Pearl restaurant. "How do you know he's not after your money?" But the investigation turned up nothing suspicious, just fragments of a mysterious past that made David even more intriguing to Lily. At the shelter, David had become everyone's favorite person. He fixed the ancient coffee maker that had been broken for months, started a small library with donated books, and even taught basic computer skills to people looking for jobs. Mrs. Wu often said he was a blessing sent from above. "That young man," she would say, wiping her glasses with her sleeve, "has the kindest heart I've ever known." One evening, as they sat on a park bench sharing a simple dinner of street food, David told Lily stories about the stars. He knew all the constellations and the myths behind them. "My grandfather taught me these stories," he said softly, pointing to the sky. "He said knowledge is the one thing nobody can take away from you." Lily realized she'd never felt more comfortable with anyone in her life. The situation at home grew tenser. Her mother started introducing her to suitable young men at every opportunity. There was the neurosurgeon's son, the investment banker, and the young politician. All perfectly polished, all completely wrong for her. "Think about your future," her father pleaded during a heated family dinner. "What will people say?" But Lily saw something in David that her parents couldn't understand. She noticed how he always saved half his sandwich for the elderly man who came to the shelter late. How he spent hours helping a young mother practice for job interviews, teaching her the confidence-building techniques he seemed to know so well. These small acts of kindness spoke louder than any bank account ever could. David never asked Lily about her family's wealth or showed interest in her material possessions. Instead, he asked about her dreams, her fears, and what made her laugh. When she won her first major case as a lawyer, he surprised her with a handmade card featuring a drawing of Lady Justice. "You fight for what's right," he wrote inside. "That's what makes you beautiful." Her best friend Rachel was the only one who understood. "I've never seen you this happy," she said over coffee one morning. "When you talk about him, your whole face lights up." Rachel had seen through the designer clothes and expensive cars that usually surrounded Lily, recognizing that her friend had finally found something real. As their relationship deepened, Lily began to understand that love wasn't about society's expectations or family traditions. It was about finding someone who made you want to be a better person, who saw the world in ways that opened your eyes to new possibilities. Every day with David taught her something new about compassion, resilience, and the true meaning of wealth. Little did her parents know, their attempts to separate them only brought Lily and David closer together. Each disapproving look, each thinly veiled insult only strengthened their bond. In David's quiet strength and unwavering kindness, Lily had found something her privileged upbringing never gave her: a love that was real, raw, and transformative. The day Lily told her parents about her decision to marry David felt like walking into a storm. Rain pattered against the tall windows of their family mansion as she sat across from them in the formal living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her mother's favorite orchids swayed gently on the windowsill, unaware of the tension filling the room. "I love him," Lily said simply, watching her parents' faces change from confusion to disbelief. Her father stood up abruptly, pacing across the Persian rug he'd bought during their last trip to Asia. "This is absolutely unacceptable," he declared, his voice trembling with emotion. "We've given you everything: the best schools, opportunities, connections, and this is how you repay us." Her mother tried a different approach, reaching for Lily's hand across the antique coffee table. "Sweetheart, think about what you're doing. How will you live? Where will you live? What about children? What will we tell our friends at the country club?" The questions poured out like the rain outside, each one meant to make Lily doubt her choice. But Lily's mind was made up. 6 months of knowing David had taught her more about love and dignity than 28 years in their privileged bubble. She thought about how David had spent his last $5 buying medicine for an elderly shelter resident instead of food for himself. How he'd stayed up all night with a teenage runaway, sharing stories until the boy felt safe enough to call his worried parents. "I don't care about the country club," Lily said quietly but firmly. "I care about being with someone who makes me a better person." Her father's face hardened at these words. He walked to his desk, pulled out a checkbook, and sat down heavily in his leather chair. "This is your trust fund," he said, pushing a statement toward her. "And this," he pulled out a family photo, "is your place in this family. Choose." The ultimatum hung in the air like heavy smoke. Lily looked at the family photo, taken at her law school graduation, all of them smiling proudly. Then she thought about David's smile when he helped others, expecting nothing in return. The choice was painful, but clear. The wedding was nothing like the grand celebration her parents had always imagined for their only daughter. Instead of the city's grand cathedral, they chose the small chapel next to the shelter. Mrs. Wu decorated it with paper flowers made by the shelter's children. Rachel helped Lily pick out a simple white dress from a local boutique, rather than the designer gown her mother had always dreamed of. David waited at the altar in a clean, pressed suit borrowed from one of the shelter's job interview clothing racks. His eyes welled up with tears when he saw Lily walking down the aisle, carrying a bouquet of daisies picked from the shelter's small garden. The ceremony was short but filled with more love than any extravagant society wedding could have contained. The shelter residents, who'd become their second family, filled the small chapel with joyful tears and genuine smiles. Tommy, the young boy David had helped with math, proudly carried the rings on a small pillow he decorated himself. The elderly man, David, shared his sandwiches with played a beautiful melody on the chapel's old piano. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, the chapel door creaked open. For a brief moment, Lily's heart jumped, thinking her parents had changed their minds. But it was just the wind, a reminder that some doors had closed while others were opening. That evening, as they shared a simple dinner with their shelter family, Lily received a text from her father. "Your things will be packed and moved out by tomorrow. The trust fund has been dissolved. You've made your choice." The words stung, but when David squeezed her hand under the table, she knew she'd chosen right. As they left the chapel under a shower of rose petals thrown by their unconventional wedding guests, Lily realized that losing her inheritance had given her something far more valuable: the freedom to live truthfully. David wrapped his arm around her waist, and together they walked toward their future, not as a lawyer and a homeless man, but as two people who had found real love in a world obsessed with appearances. Life after the wedding took on a rhythm very different from what Lily had known before. Their new home was a small one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of an old building, with creaky floors and a window that stuck in humid weather. But somehow, it felt more like home than her previous luxury condo ever had. Every morning, Lily would wake up early to prepare for her cases at the law firm, while David started taking odd jobs around the neighborhood. He fixed Mrs. Patterson's leaky faucet in apartment 2B, helped old Mr. Chen from the corner store organize his inventory, and started a small handyman service that gradually gained regular customers. But there was something else about David that Lily couldn't quite figure out. Some evenings, he would receive mysterious phone calls that made him step onto their tiny balcony to talk in hushed tones. Other times, she'd spot him meeting with people in business suits at the local coffee shop, engaged in serious conversations over laptops and papers. "Just working on a project," he'd say with a gentle smile whenever she asked, and somehow Lily knew to trust him. There was something in his eyes that told her whatever he was doing was important, maybe even bigger than both of them. Their weekend routine became sacred. Saturday mornings were still spent at the shelter, but now they went together as husband and wife. The shelter kids would run to David as soon as he walked in, showing him their homework or new drawings. He always had time for everyone, whether it was helping teenagers with job applications or teaching computer basics to older residents. One rainy Tuesday evening, Lily came home from a long day in court to find David surrounded by stacks of papers and notebooks. He quickly gathered them up when she entered, but not before she caught glimpses of complex diagrams and calculations. "Everything okay?" she asked, hanging up her rain-soaked coat. "Better than okay," he replied with that mysterious smile she'd grown to love. "Just trust me a little longer." Money was tight, but they found joy in simple things. They discovered a small park nearby where they'd take evening walks, sharing stories about their day. Instead of expensive restaurants, they explored local food trucks and family-owned cafes. David turned out to be an amazing cook, making delicious meals from simple ingredients and teaching Lily how to make his grandmother's secret soup recipe. Some nights were harder than others. Lily would catch herself staring at old family photos on her phone, missing her parents despite everything. David would quietly sit beside her, holding her hand, understanding her pain without needing words. "Family is complicated," he'd say, "but love is patient." Their apartment slowly transformed into a cozy home. David built shelves from reclaimed wood for Lily's law books. They found a comfortable second-hand couch where they spent evenings reading together. The kitchen window now had herbs growing in recycled jars. David's small garden project that provided fresh basil and mint for their meals. Rachel visited often, bringing takeout and gossip from their old social circle. "You seem different," she told Lily one evening while they sat on the floor eating noodles. "Happier, somehow. More real." Lily knew exactly what she meant. Living simply had stripped away all the pretenses she'd grown up with. The mysterious meetings continued. Sometimes David would come home late, exhausted but excited about something he couldn't share yet. Lily noticed how he spent hours on their laptop, writing emails and making spreadsheets. Once, she overheard him on the phone discussing something about implementation phases and community impact assessments. What surprised her most was how content she felt in their modest life. The designer handbags and expensive jewelry from her past life seemed meaningless now. Instead, she treasured the handmade birthday card David created, featuring drawings of all their special moments together. The way he left little notes in her lunch bag before big court days meant more than any luxury gift ever had. As autumn turned to winter, their tiny apartment filled with more love than Lily had ever known in her parents' mansion. Every morning, watching David get ready for whatever mysterious work he was doing, she felt sure that choosing love over luxury had been the right decision. Little did she know, their story was about to take an unexpected turn that would shake up not just their lives, but the entire city's perception of what truly matters. The truth came out on a quiet Sunday morning, 6 months into their marriage. Lily was sipping coffee on their tiny balcony when she noticed an unusual number of cars parked outside their building. Through the steam rising from her cup, she spotted several news vans, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. Before she could process what was happening, their doorbell rang. David was already dressed, as if he'd been expecting this moment. "It's time," he said softly, taking her hand. "There's something I need to show you." His eyes held a mix of nervousness and relief, like someone about to share a long-kept secret. They drove to the downtown business district in David's old car, the one he'd been using for his handyman jobs. As they pulled up to the gleaming Roberts Technology Tower, David handed the keys to the valet like he'd done it 1,000 times before. The security guards nodded respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Roberts." Lily's confusion grew with each step they took toward the executive elevator. In the penthouse office, overlooking the city they'd been living in so differently, David finally shared his story. He wasn't just David the handyman. He was David Roberts I, heir to the Roberts technology empire, a fortune worth over $2 billion. "I needed to understand," he explained, watching Lily's face carefully. I needed to know what it was really like for people struggling with homelessness, not from reports or statistics, but from real life. The past year had been his mission to develop a revolutionary program for helping homeless individuals rebuild their lives. Every odd job, every late-night meeting, every hushed phone call, all part of his massive research project. He'd been working with experts, social workers, and former homeless individuals to create something that would actually work. "But why didn't you tell me?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. David took her hands in his, the same gentle touch she'd grown to love. "I needed to know that someone could love me for who I am, not what I own. When you chose me, even though it meant losing everything, you showed me what real love looks like." The Roberts Rehabilitation Initiative was bigger than anything Lily had imagined. David had poured not just his fortune, but his heart into creating a comprehensive program that would provide housing, job training, mental health support, and most importantly, dignity to people struggling with homelessness. Tears filled Lily's eyes as David showed her the plans. The shelter where they'd met would become the first of many centers across the country. Mrs. Wu had been in on the secret, helping David understand the real challenges faced by shelter residents. Even some of those mysterious suited visitors had been social policy experts and program developers. "Remember Tommy, who struggled with math?" David smiled. "His progress helped me design the education component. And Mr. Chen from the corner store? He's agreed to be one of our first job placement partners." Every interaction, every relationship had served a greater purpose while remaining genuinely meaningful. The media was already gathering in the conference room down the hall, eager to hear about the wealthy heir who had lived as a homeless man to truly understand the problem he wanted to solve. But David had insisted on telling Lily first, in private, in their own way. "I'm not angry," Lily said, looking out over the city where their love story had unfolded. "But I do have one condition." David raised an eyebrow, awaiting. "We keep our apartment," she smiled. "It's home." David pulled her close, relieved and grateful. "We can have both," he whispered. "The means to help others and the simple life we've built together." As they prepared to face the press, Lily thought about how this revelation would reach her parents. Their daughter had married not just a homeless man, but one of the wealthiest and most innovative philanthropists in the country. But more importantly, she had married someone whose heart matched his resources, whose compassion drove his actions, and whose love had been pure from the start. The headlines would soon be everywhere, but the biggest story wasn't about money or social status. It was about a man who had everything but chose to live with nothing to understand how to truly help others. And about a woman who had chosen love over wealth, only to discover she had found both in the most unexpected way. The news exploded across the city like wildfire. Every newspaper, TV channel, and social media platform buzzed with the same incredible story. Billionaire heir lives homeless to create revolutionary social program. People couldn't get enough of it. The security guard at Hope Harbor Shelter had to turn away dozens of reporters who came looking for stories about the mysterious David Roberts. Lily's parents first learned about it during their morning routine. Her father nearly choked on his coffee when he saw David's face on the front page of his newspaper. Her mother dropped her phone right into her breakfast when the notifications started flooding in. Their son-in-law, the man they'd rejected as a homeless nobody, was actually wealthier and more influential than their entire social circle combined. At the official launch of the Roberts Rehabilitation Initiative, David stood at the podium, looking more comfortable in his simple suit than any of the wealthy donors in their designer wear. "This isn't about charity," he explained to the packed auditorium. "It's about understanding, respect, and real solutions." He shared stories about the people he'd met, the lessons he'd learned, and how living on the streets had opened his eyes to what really needed to change. The program was unlike anything anyone had seen before. Instead of just providing temporary shelter, it offered a complete support system. Job training programs partnered with local businesses, Mental health services were readily available, and most importantly, people were treated with dignity. Tommy's mother had already become one of the first success stories, landing a job as a program coordinator after completing her training. Lily's mother made the first move toward reconciliation, sending a large flower arrangement to Lily's office. But Lily returned it with a simple note. What I needed was your love, not your approval. It took 3 more attempts, expensive gifts, a letter from their family lawyer, and finally, a handwritten note expressing genuine regret before real healing could begin. The breakthrough came when Lily's parents visited the shelter, not as wealthy donors, but as humble observers. They watched David work with the residents, saw how he treated everyone with respect, and began to understand what their daughter had seen all along. Mrs. Wu took special pleasure in telling them stories about all the times David had helped others while living as a homeless man. We were wrong, Lily's father admitted during a quiet family dinner at Lily and David's apartment. They sat around the small table that David had built himself, eating his grandmother's soup recipe. We judged by appearances, by our own prejudices. Can you forgive us? The reconciliation wasn't instant or easy. Trust had to be rebuilt one small moment at a time. But as Lily's parents became more involved with the initiative, they began to change. Her mother started volunteering at the shelter's job preparation workshops, teaching people the social skills she'd once used only in country club settings. Her father used his business connections to create more employment opportunities for program participants. A year after the big revelation, the Roberts Initiative had already helped hundreds of people rebuild their lives. But the most powerful story wasn't about the money or the program's success. It was about how love had transformed everyone it touched. The wealthy had learned to see beyond status, the poor had received opportunities instead of handouts, and a family had healed its wounds through understanding and acceptance. David and Lily continued living in their modest apartment, though they now had the means to buy any mansion in the city. This is where our love story began, David would say, fixing the sticky window that still wouldn't budge in humid weather. They used their resources to help others while keeping their own lives simple and genuine. On warm evenings, you might still find them at the shelter, sitting with residents, sharing stories, and showing through their own example that true worth isn't found in a bank account or a family name. It's found in the capacity to love, to understand, and to help others. Their story became a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love require us to look past appearances, to trust our hearts, and to believe in the goodness that exists in every human being. The media attention eventually faded, but the impact of their story lived on. In the end, it wasn't just about a wealthy heir who chose to live as a homeless man, or about parents who learned to value character over status. It was about the transformative power of love. Love that sees beyond appearances, love that risks everything for what's right, and love that has the power to change not just 2 people, but an entire community. As the sun set over the city skyline, casting golden light through their apartment window, Lily and David held hands on their small balcony, watching the city lights come alive. Their story had changed countless lives, but most importantly, it had shown that when you choose love over prejudice, when you trust your heart over society's expectations, something truly magical can happen. Sometimes, the greatest riches in life come disguised as our greatest challenges, and the most precious gifts are found in the moments when we dare to look beyond the surface and see the true worth of a person's heart.